welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabarty. We are coming to you live on Monday afternoon. Today is August 12th, and we have a whole lot to dive into between Team USA taking home the gold in the men's basketball tournament. Ended up getting, I'd say, two classic games down the stretch in the semifinals and in the finals, and what ultimately shaped out to be probably the strongest overall men's basketball tournament in the history of the Olympics. So we're going to break that down as well. We got to see LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant all come together to make this possible. And specifically, I want to focus on the legacy of Steph Curry, who takes home his first ever gold medal and was the guy at the end of really both of these last two games and just absolutely took over. So I want to evaluate where he ranks all time as well. I feel like he is one of the more interesting cases out of recent players and what their case would be to be in that top 10 of all time. So we're going to be diving into that. And additionally, we will be talking about some NFL preseason first impressions. Obviously, just the preseason, a little bit lower stakes, but we did get our first impressions, our first looks at the rookie quarterbacks now in their new home. So we're going to go across each and every one of their performances and talk about how it played out for them and what my expectations are for them during the regular season for their first ever rookie year. And then additionally, I want to stay on that note of the quarterback evaluation and talk about some of the battles for that starter position, which does also sort of overlap, specifically in the case of the Denver Broncos and others. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we will wrap up the show by continuing on with our previews for all 32 NFL teams. Today, we are kicking off the NFC North as we are going to be diving into the Chicago Bears and what their season is going to look like in this coming year with Caleb Williams now at the helm for them. So a whole lot to dive into, but before we do so, just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. If you have a question during the show, be sure to use the comment section to give us your thoughts. Doesn't have to be a question exactly either. Any of your thoughts on the latest happenings in sports. And if you want to become a bigger part of the show and make sure that your message stands out, you can now use the super chat feature that was just added to the GSMC Sports Network here. You can just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat, which guarantees that your message is going to get on the air. And it is also a very appreciated way for you to support our channel. So we really appreciate anything we may get on that front. If you prefer, you can use the GSMCsports.net website to tip, donate, or leave a comment there as well. Anything would be greatly appreciated. We are now going to be diving into the gold medal game between Team USA and Team France for what ultimately rounded out an incredible basketball tournament. And we saw the U.S. get pushed maybe a little bit down the stretch of this game, where the U.S. was in control the majority of the way through and this game in particular, but it did get down to a one-possession game with a few minutes left as France started to make a run, U.S. getting a little bit tight, but in stepped Steph Curry to put all of those doubts at ease. He was unbelievable down the final stretch of this game, and to anybody who is a part of the Steph Curry isn't clutch thinking, that probably came to an end over the course of this weekend, because in back-to-back games we saw him be one of the guys on one of the most talented basketball teams ever assembled. Specifically in this one, seeing him hit 4 3-pointers in the final 3 minutes and sort of helping the U.S. to pull away in this game. He scored 24 points. The shooting was incredible for him once again. He was 8-12 in this game, coming off of, I believe it was something along the lines of 7 of 13 in the semifinals as well. So Steph Curry just on an absolute heater down the stretch of this Olympics, and he ultimately was able to maybe generate a little bit of buzz for himself as well in terms of whether or not he should be the MVP. But Steph Curry, just the way that he was able to close this thing out, Curry has been a little bit, he's been a beneficiary and has also been harmed a little bit by the fact that he played on the Warriors. 2 of his rings came with Kevin Durant, so there was a little bit of, at that point, I do think that Kevin Durant was the better basketball player, and I don't think that takes away from Curry whatsoever, but a lot of people do sort of use that as a knock against Steph's resume. But we saw it doesn't matter who he plays with. He is able to be the guy when it's all said and done. That last 3 that he hit, stepping back, fading away, 2 defenders in his grill, that was one of, if not maybe the biggest individual shot of Curry's entire career, where it's not like he has necessarily been known as a closer, but he 100% slammed the door shut in this game. He was unbelievable. But it wasn't obviously just the Steph Curry show. And the big 3 of him, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James is what helped get it done. KD in this game became the first ever U.S. Olympic basketball player to win 4 gold medals. We've talked about this before. I think that he has a very good case for being the greatest basketball Olympian in United States history. Carmelo Anthony had a number of the top records and such until Kevin Durant sort of came in and stole the show this Olympic season, where he became the all-time leading scorer and the all-time leading rebounder, picked up his 4th medal. He was a major contributor. He hit the dagger shot in the semifinals against Serbia and did his contributions in this game as well. 15 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. He is definitely, in conversation for that greatest U.S. Olympian. It's probably, in my eyes at least, between him and LeBron James, of course, who is LeBron. So naturally, hard to count him out of any conversation along those lines. Posted another double-double in this game, 14 points, 10 assists, and also grabbed 6 rebounds. Was definitely more of the driving force, I'd say, in the first half. Looked a little bit more fatigued in the second, but still another incredible performance from LeBron, who ends up being awarded the MVP award for this year's Olympics. Very well deserved. There was a little bit of a debate between him and Steph at the end, just because the weight of Curry's big moments in these last 2 games, obviously in elimination matchups, having Curry take over down the stretch, it deserves a ton of love, and we're going to dive into sort of what it looks like his overall legacy here. But I think that, it took Steph a very long time during the group stage or so to fully become the Steph Curry that we all know. And LeBron was just so consistent for Team USA and was shouldering so much of the responsibility all the way throughout. It's interesting with LeBron. I think that I might have mentioned this on a show last week, that it is now, I think that we were sort of, as an NBA community, fully, for the most part, moved on from the idea of LeBron still being a top 5 player in the NBA. And it's clear that LeBron James in a vacuum is still, you cannot leave him on a top 5 basketball players list you can't leave him out of it. Now, I do think it's a little bit of a different conversation off of who is the best basketball player for a, single game elimination type tournament like this versus an NBA player with 82 game regular seasons and a 7-game series as well in the postseason. That's where I think that the age of LeBron, this one's a little bit more of a sprint. It's just a few weeks that LeBron can go out and dominate. We saw him in bursts be able to take over. If you remember, during the in-season tournament, he ended up being the MVP of that. And he was incredible then. He was incredible in this tournament. But that's where I think it's definitely a debate. If you're going to put LeBron in your top 5 after watching what he just did, I can't disagree with you necessarily, but it does, LeBron did sort of re-enter his name in that conversation for anyone like me who was sort of moving on to the next generation. LeBron said, not so fast. Still 39 years old, but still got it. And it was just so special getting to watch this run out of the three of Steph, LeBron, and Kevin Durant, that they have been, the faces of the NBA for the past decade plus, probably. Curry and LeBron's first matchup in the finals was 2014-15, and since then it has really been dominated by, these faces. And it's going to be really weird to see an NBA without them and what it's going to look like as well. You think about the players that are currently on Team USA. It's like, which players are the ones who are going to emerge to have these moments that these players had in this set of Olympic Games? Going to be really interesting to watch how things progress. But as much as, sure, with greatness always comes scrutiny to some degree, and Curry, LeBron, and Kevin Durant have all faced their share of critics. But this was definitely, at least for me personally, I know it sounds a little bit corny, but just the appreciate greatness moments, that's all I could really experience here. And I especially was thinking as well that in an alternate universe where I didn't have rooting interests and that it wasn't so overpowered, I would have, enjoying Steph Curry and Kevin Durant playing alongside one another would have been so much fun. But obviously at the time, the landscape of the league was very different, and it still was basically cheating. It felt like cheating, at the time at least. But what a fun set of games from this trio. And it seems like it's probably going to be the last Olympics for each of them. LeBron already said that this was his last one. Team USA did just say that they could tentatively keep a roster spot open for Kevin Durant if he wanted to return in 2028. At this point, let me double check on the math here. But with Kevin Durant, at that point, he'll be probably 40 years old. Right now, he is currently 35, so I guess he'll be 39, same as LeBron. So it's on the table. Already the all-time leader in gold medals for the U.S. Olympic team. Could he add a fifth one to it? That might just be one of the unbreakable records if Kevin Durant does come back around. But, what a run between these three players. I do want to give some special credit as well to a couple other players, especially in this game. Anthony Davis, I thought that he was tremendous. Steve Kerr decided to lean a little bit further away from Joel Embiid in this game, and Anthony Davis was the one who played big minutes. 20 minutes for them, was part of the closing group, and you could see why he was, because Embiid, for as incredible as he is, especially given the fact that he's dealing with some physical ailments, Anthony Davis is just a more switchable defender, and especially along the perimeter and the three-point line, he can hold his own a lot more. And defensively and on the glass, Davis was a force in this game. And you saw it in those final few minutes. France was trying to pick on AD a little bit on the perimeter, pull him outside and see if he could hold his own on that one possession right outside a minute left. He ended up having a pass deflection and the block of an Evan Fournier three-point attempt within the span of 20 seconds or so. He was so impactful. I mentioned on the glass as well, 6 offensive rebounds, including a couple in the fourth. The stat line doesn't necessarily jump off of the page, but the offensive rebounds, 4 blocks out of Team USA's 6 was really impactful there. Had a couple steals along the way as well. Anthony Davis, I think, went pretty underappreciated. And obviously, Joel Embiid got his shine, especially in that game versus Serbia. And I am glad that ultimately we can come out of this with a positive, at least personally for me. I think it was, we saw the peak of Embiid that I was hoping for. It wasn't exactly always consistent, but whenever he wasn't there, Anthony Davis was able to fill in his shoes, and he did an incredible job. So I wanted to give Anthony Davis his flowers, and Devin Booker as well, where he went just so under the radar because of the fact that Devin Booker, and it was also a little bit of a realization that, Booker came up as more of a prototypical shooting guard, so it should have been no surprise that he was going to be able to seamlessly fit in with all of these different ball handlers. He's been getting a lot more sort of combo guard reps throughout the past couple of years in Phoenix, especially this past year where the Suns didn't have an actual point guard, that Booker was a lot more of an initiator, and you see the growths within his game, especially on the playmaking end, that make for a lot of positives. But averaged 11 points per game for Team USA, shooting 56% from three, was really impressive. And ultimately, you have to give him some credit because he's somebody that definitely flies under the radar, but for whatever it's worth, don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole. But when you look at how Jason Tatum wasn't really able to fit in offensively, I think at times Joel Embiid, for, again, as great as he is, these are excellent players we're talking about, and they weren't able to mesh perfectly with the rest of Team USA and their ball dominant guys in that big three. That Devin Booker, the fact that you didn't notice him at times could be a credit to, he held his own. He did what he was asked of him, and he really was an excellent role player for Team USA, and again, just super consistent throughout. So I want to give him his credit as well. Quickly on the France side of this game as well, where it was really impressive what we saw from Victor Wembanyama throughout this entire tournament. Sure, there were moments where the efficiency necessarily wasn't there, but you just look at the impact he so clearly has on the defensive side of the ball, and plus, especially in this gold medal game, getting the chance to see the offense as well, because baseline Victor Wembanyama, I think, is going to be basically, he was runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year his rookie season, so I think as long as he's healthy moving forward, we can expect Hall of Fame caliber defense from Victor Wembanyama, and I really don't think that that's hyperbole at this point, but it's seeing what that offensive side of his game is going to evolve into. Dropped 26 points in this game, 11 of 19 from the field, 3 of 8 from three. Obviously, he's still very young at just 20 years old, that there's going to be a little bit of refining when it comes to his touch around the rim and the consistency of his three-point shot. But Wembanyama, just an incredible talent. And it was very interesting as well. After the game, I saw a quote that came out from him. It was from Ian Finger, I believe his name was. And it was just about what it's going to be like for Wemby moving forward. He said, quote, "I'm learning and I'm worried for the opponents in a couple years." And a reporter asked, in FIBA or in the NBA? And Wemby responded with, "Everywhere," which is just a pretty cold quote from, you can just see the competitive nature within Wembanyama crying after this game. He legitimately thought that they were going to come out of this, and he just had such a different level of pride for himself, for his country, for the team, trying to win these games, that I don't think we're going to see that competitive fire go anywhere. But did also want to give some love, obviously, to Guerschon Yabusele, dropping 20 points in this game, posterizing LeBron at one point. Yabusele, a former first-round pick in 2016, spent a couple years with the Celtics, and the way that he's just been able to evolve his game. It's not like I've been keeping up with him playing for Madrid in Europe these past couple years, but just a total transformation of what Yabusele, when he exited the NBA after 2018 to where he is now. I really have a hard time thinking as to why he shouldn't get an NBA contract, and one of my friends threw out to me the idea of, why wouldn't the Spurs go and get him? And, who knows really what their relationship is like behind the scenes of Wemby and Yabusele, but For whatever it's worth, I understand you want as many players as possible that have the boom potential and could be, stars one day, but also the Spurs, they just signed Chris Paul in the offseason. They want to start taking themselves a little bit more seriously. And Yabusele, for whatever it's worth, he could kind of do everything at this point. Not an excellent three-point shooter, but isn't a liability there, is more than comfortable taking the shots. His defense, I thought, was really impressive throughout this tournament. The rebounding as well. It seemed like him and Wembanyama had a pretty good rapport in terms of the way that they were able to play off of one another for, I don't know if you would totally consider Yabusele as a big, but one of the bigger players on France at least. So I just thought that was a lot of fun to watch and, give France their credit because this was a spectacular run. It was awesome getting to see them playing in front of the home crowd as well. And just the energy that was brought throughout this entire Olympics was incredible to see. So France ends up, getting the silver, and there's nothing to be ashamed of in that because the win against Canada, the win against Germany, these were not givens by any means coming into this tournament, and they ultimately carved out a path of their own and are being awarded fairly for it afterwards. But again, just the Olympics and basketball obviously still run through the United States. And it's so awesome getting to see, these top-end guys playing. But once a LeBron, Durant, and Curry are all out, I understand U.S. wins the gold, and you mark it up and you look at they've won however many consecutive golds, 5, 6, something like that. And the U.S. still dominates, but, the world is definitely on an upwards trajectory, and a lot of the younger up-and-coming players are from overseas, so it's going to be very interesting to monitor how this all plays out from here and how Team USA is able to sort of find a new identity moving forward. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section on all of this. I do want to dive a little bit deeper into the specifics of the legacies of Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant. So that's what we are going to be diving into. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, no, this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news if it's some moosey shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as I want to sort of look at how we look at LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry coming out of these Olympics, because obviously as their careers are coming to an end, we are starting to get to the point, everybody knows that typically the careers of players get looked at a little bit more fondly over time, but at the same time as well, we can be a little bit overreactionary in the present and put people in conversations that they don't necessarily deserve to be a part of. And specifically, I want to start here by talking about Steph Curry, because especially after everything that just went down, the way that Curry was able to shut it down at the end of the gold medal game, and scoring those 12 points within the span of less than 3 minutes. It was unbelievable. And I really do feel like Curry is it's probably these three in general. At least, obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I didn't get to grow up watching the Michael Jordans, Larry Birds, Julius Ervings, Kareems, any of those. But when Steph Curry is physically on and he's feeling it, I don't know if aesthetically there is a more appealing player to watch than Curry when he's just hitting these off balance, fading away, ridiculous shots. Now, Kevin Durant is also one of those players that, just such an ethical hooper when you talk about the pull-ups of just there's nothing anybody can do to stop them. And LeBron is in the conversation as well, but Curry takeover just makes me feel something different as well, the way that those three-pointers are just able to fly. And there's definitely a case to be made for him being in the greatest point guard of all time. Now, again, I want to acknowledge ahead of the time before we get into any of these conversations that I can do my research and everything, but I never experienced Magic Johnson or any of these other historical players in real time to the point where I know that I'm not the most qualified for this type of a debate, but at the same time, you look at the overall accomplishments, and I do think that Curry, is going to be really approaching that top 10 players of all time conversation off of what we did. Now, him adding a gold medal to his collection, it really was, for the most part, outside of a Defensive Player of the Year award, which was never really going to be in the cards for him. Outside of that, Curry had pretty much every accolade that you could ask for until this gold medal, and now that that's done, it feels like he's checked pretty much every box. But I think that also, again, when you just look at the skill of Steph Curry and sort of what it means and how it transcends, and for whatever it's worth, there's always this adage about if they are truly special, you can't tell the game, the story of the game of basketball without him. And I think that Steph Curry is going to go down as one of the most influential players in NBA history. And maybe it's just a fact of the matter. Eventually, teams were going to get smart to the fact that the three-point shot is just so much more valuable, and that it is a way to sort of elevate your game. That maybe it's just the fact that Curry was sort of the first of the bunch, but regardless, he was the first. And not just that, but it's not like he came in and just became, a really good shooter and made people aware of it. He was the greatest shooter of all time and just absolutely burst onto the scene. It became exponential, the amount of three-pointers that were being attempted on a regular basis, what is and isn't considered a good shot. And Curry is going to pretty much be the exact line of demarcation of when the NBA started fully implementing, the full spread offense a little bit in a similar light, turned into the death a little bit of, traditional post bigs, even more so than that, the post bigs, but also the four spot where you used to kind of have two post guys in your center and your power forward. That just does not fly anymore in the NBA. And for whatever it's worth, I have been vocal at times about the Cleveland Cavaliers, where both very talented players would probably be an absolute force if, that combination was in the NBA together 20 or so years ago, and now it just doesn't fly. And it really is because of Steph Curry. And I think that, again, he both benefited and was hurt from the idea that he played with Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and all of these different Hall of Famers throughout his career, where it propelled him to be able to play on the biggest stage. But nobody wants to give Curry credit for 2017 and 2018 because Kevin Durant was probably the better player at the same time. He was probably the better player on that roster at the time, at least in my opinion. That's still debatable, but it was also still Steph's team at the end of the day. And that was very clear when, Kevin Durant was sort of pushed out by Draymond Green. And Steph was also just so selfish from Draymond at that point. I know Draymond's done so much for the Warriors, but I also do feel like at the same time, just watching these games, and again, I'm not opposed whatsoever to the fact that Kevin Durant left Golden State, because from a pure basketball watching standpoint, such a cool combination between the two of them. It was just so unfair, though, that I'm glad it came to an end, but again, if rooting interests just weren't a thing whatsoever, a pure basketball enjoyer, I mean, watching Kevin Durant and Steph Curry play together was sort of a dream. And it was a dream because Curry also was so willing to accept the reduced shot attempts. And he was just, it became a point where, not every star player would have been able to make that type of a sacrifice and be okay with it. And KD ends up winning both of the finals MVPs, which both of them rightfully so, but somehow that makes it look bad for Curry that he was a part of championship teams, but he wasn't the best player, even though Kevin Durant also in that conversation for the top 10, 15 best basketball players in history. So it's a weird dichotomy of all of it. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm just coming out of these Olympics reflecting on the legacies that these players had. And again, it's just a natural understanding that when you are great, you're going to face criticism. And that's totally fair. I still think that Kevin Durant, to this day, as excellent as he is, and I don't think he gets enough credit, that yes, LeBron was, the best player in the league for a lot of years. Kevin Durant was never, it's not like LeBron was ever on his own atmosphere and, uncontested. That was definitely a possibility for a couple years, but, once you start getting into 2013, I think was KD's first MVP year, 14, along those lines, like KD was neck and neck with LeBron, but unfortunately for KD as well, doesn't have the championship as really the sole guy without Steph Curry also. So it's so weird how that relationship between him and Curry both sort of bake into one another that kind of harms it, even though the fact that, they made the greatest basketball team of all time. And it is just so much more contested because people hated it, and I understand why, but I don't think that you can use them playing together as a knock on the types of basketball players they were, the influence they had on the game, and where they sort of stand alongside one another all time. Like Kevin Durant probably he will not, from a public perception standpoint, get the credit for those championships that maybe he deserves. I also understand from a pure competitor standpoint, I understand, again, the purism of watching basketball. It was kind of a no-brainer move for him to go sign with the Warriors, but considering they just blew the lead to them, 3-1 lead in the Western Conference Finals, it was one of the softer moves, and it's going to be remembered that way in NBA history. But again, if you take emotions out of it, it's like Kevin Durant's options at that point, it was to stay in OKC, which would have been a valid, choice for him. Him and Russ would have been in competition for winning the finals again next year. The Celtics were reportedly on the table during that offseason. The Wizards, for him to go home with a John Wall and Brad Beal. But you look at all of those other destinations and sort of how they aged from there. Again, it was kind of a no-brainer move for just the pure enjoyment of basketball for KD to sign with the Warriors. And it's always going to be held over the top of really the two of them combined. I'd say more so KD, since Curry has the other rings without him as well. But I mean, man, this is just such a special era in NBA history with these three players. And again, getting to watch all of them close out with one another and have this sort of last moment. Again, we'll see, maybe KD makes that return trying to take home gold medal number 5, which would be ridiculous. But it would be especially ridiculous considering at that point that's 20 years of, and LeBron obviously doing the same thing at 39 years old. He just won his 4th and was the MVP. So, LeBron, I understand it's a very similar thing, but Kevin Durant, it's more so the willingness from him that he, again, people say that he ducked competition by going to the Warriors, but the dude loves basketball, and I don't know. I think that I just have such a great respect for him, even if he made a very unpopular move when he did sign with the Warriors. But sort of just threw a lot of different legacy conversation things out there. Let me know in the comments section whether or not you think I'm being, too... I know that, again, I'm defending some moves here that are going down as some of the most popular things to ever happen in the game of basketball. So if you think I'm too defensive of it, let me know in the comments section and let me know why. But again, I'm just feeling nostalgic right now. I'm feeling like I'm really appreciating everything that we were able to just witness with these players, and definitely think it's going to be a tournament that I'm going to remember as the final goodbye for these 3 stars. But we also had this weekend, while the Olympics were concluding, we did have the first week of preseason action from the NFL. Some of the first looks of the rookie first-round quarterbacks. So we're going to be diving into how each of them performed in their debut, what you can take away from that, and more. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to be diving into some NFL preseason action. And the first thing that I want to take a look at is the performance of the rookie quarterbacks that we were able to see over the course of the weekend. We did get our first look at Drake May last Thursday, talked about it a little bit on Friday, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. May only got 1 drive, was a very quiet one. Pouring rain, the Patriots didn't even really let him throw the ball downfield, so not much you can take out of that whatsoever. But I want to start with the number 1 overall pick and Caleb Williams, who got, also, by the way, if Caleb Williams is getting multiple drives, Patriots kind of lame to not let Drake May, fly a little bit more, but again, whatever. Caleb Williams did end up playing 2 drives in this game, 20 plays total. That was sort of the expectation that he was going to get around 15. Ends up, because he and the Bears put together a couple of good drives, ended up coming out to 20 plays during that time. Caleb Williams, 4 of 7, throwing 95 yards, had 2 drives that, were moving down the field. Both of them ended up stalling out in the red zone. Ultimately, again, not going to overreact to anything. One of the times, he didn't even get a single pass attempt in the red zone. So definitely not, and the second time, a key drop also sort of helped to stall that drive out. So I thought that Caleb Williams looked really comfortable, really sharp, sort of what we were expecting from him. His ability to be mobile, throwing on the run, and for whatever it's worth, I definitely don't need to put another person down to praise the present, but I think that obviously some of the biggest complaints around Caleb Williams while he was at school and sort of how that mirrored the Bears' issue with Justin Fields was the offensive line isn't elite, and both of them can have the tendency to take unnecessary sacks. And Caleb Williams, I thought the way that he was able to navigate around the pocket, granted, you're playing a backup defense, I fully understand, but Caleb Williams stayed on his feet the whole time and, again, was very sharp. Now, he did have one throw when the second drive kicked off. The Bears ended up starting up on their own 3-yard line, and on third down, he actually almost made a very costly mistake, made a risky throw off of his back foot to the outside that could have very easily been intercepted. Now, it didn't even matter because that should have ended the drive, but instead there ended up being an illegal contact call that extended it. And Caleb was able to respond well from there, and again, like I mentioned, get them all the way down the field into the red zone before things ended up stalling there. But outside of that one play, I thought that Caleb Williams looked incredible. Some really nice throws on third down, had a nice third down conversion with his legs as well, where he was able to pick up first down on 3rd and 9 by scrambling out of the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield the entire time, and legging that one out. I was very impressed with what we saw from Caleb Williams, and I've been very positive on him in terms of what he's going to be like as a pro prospect, and nothing that I saw from this game would necessarily turn me off of that idea. To be fair, don't think that there's anything that really could have happened in any of these games that would have made me feel super strongly about, whether or not I was right or wrong headed into their preseason evaluation. But number 2 overall pick, Jaden Daniels, like May, only got one drive, but was a much more productive drive for Washington than it was for New England if we're making comparisons there. It didn't look great off the jump. His first pass attempt, he just completely skied a screen attempt over the head of his running back, but he then ended up making a beautiful throw down the right sideline to De'Ami Brown that picked up 42 yards, and it was really good coverage as well, so he sort of put it right on the dime there. I thought it was an unbelievable throw. That was most of what we got from Jaden in that game. Now, he did also end up scoring the touchdown himself with his legs. The Commanders, out of the 11 plays on the drive, 8 of them were on the ground, so it's not like we got all that much of a sample size from Jaden Daniels' arm other than that throw that he made to Brown, but he ends up scoring the touchdown himself on a read option that he ended up keeping himself and bouncing to the outside. So I think that that's going to be something interesting too, is to look at how much the Commanders are going to utilize his legs throughout his rookie season, because it is such a weapon for him. He's a little bit of a skinnier guy. He's been prone to taking unnecessary hits. You could leave it at that. You could be more harsh about it as well, where he gets himself killed at times. But I am curious to see his development in terms of understanding his importance level almost to the team. And this is the NFL now. You're not going to be able to get away with putting yourself in vulnerable positions and on a consistent basis. So Jaden Daniels, it was a nice debut. Again, very limited as to what we saw from him, but ultimately pretty good overall. Then skipping over Drake May here, Michael Penix Jr., obviously a little bit of a controversial pick for the Falcons at the time. And again, especially for somebody who feels so NFL ready in Michael Penix Jr. from day one, that was kind of the idea, that he already is this older prospect and that he is going to, sort of have enough pro-ready talent that why sit him for these next 3-4 seasons, but ultimately, I mean, it is what it is. He ends up playing in this game, and on Friday, and I thought that he was very impressive. He played the entirety of the first quarter, and I thought that out of all the rookies, he might have been the second best performer along those lines. Not going to sit here and power rank the performances from rookie quarterbacks based off of a preseason game, but 9 of 16, 104 yards. Had a couple things that didn't necessarily go his way. One of his receivers fumbling, for example, as well, that I feel like we could have gotten a lot more of a Michael Penix experience if, he was able to stick around a little bit longer on some of those drives. He ended up getting 3 of them. Like I mentioned, it was a fumble on one of them. It was 3 and out on the first drive. So ultimately, I thought he looked really nice. Some good deep balls as well. The pass that he had down the right sideline to Chris Blair, that was a really nice one. I thought he made all of the right decisions. The just precision was maybe a little bit off on some throws that led to some incompletions, but I don't think that he put the ball in harm's way himself. I thought he had a really good control and feel for the game as a whole, and I was really positive on it. Again, though, I just kind of feel like I'm so disappointed he's on the Falcons because we're not going to get to see him for so long. But I think that if you're a Falcons fan and you're buying into whatever the plan may be here with Penix moving forward, I do think that he's going to be a good quarterback. It's just a matter of when is he actually going to get the opportunity to show that off himself. But we also had the 10th overall pick in J.J. McCarthy make his debut. We got a lot of runway out of him. Sam Darnold ended up starting in this game, and ultimately, I think that Darnold was fine, I suppose. I get that they're maybe going to try and let J.J. McCarthy, who hasn't necessarily had to the opposite point of Michael Penix a little bit. I think that McCarthy doesn't have a lot of experience as being a consistent, I am the guy throwing wise, and the identity of the team is sort of through me. And I'm not really all that much of a believer in the run game of the Vikings, that it would definitely be a pretty steep step in week 1. We did see McCarthy's day start with an interception, which was a pretty bad decision throwing into double coverage and ends up getting intercepted. But I thought he responded really well from that. Final stat line, 11 for 17, 188 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think that for McCarthy, again, it's not necessarily raw talent, but it is going to take some time, I think, before he's fully comfortable. And I definitely expect speed bumps along the way for McCarthy and his understanding. It's a reps thing for him because he wasn't asked to be the lead guy for it, and it wasn't an air raid offense that he was playing in at Michigan. It was very deliberately more ground and pound, but the talent is definitely there. So somebody that I think I don't think he's going to be the week 1 starter, but we should see him this season, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. And then last guy I want to touch on here is Bo Nix, who Broncos played the Colts just yesterday on Sunday afternoon. And, Bo Nix had a couple plays early on that were a little bit iffy. His first pass was almost an interception that, the D-back just couldn't hold on to. He was under pressure, and he just didn't have enough arm on it at the time, which is one of the biggest knocks with Bo Nix is, does he have the arm strength? Does he have a strong arm? And I think that that's going to be a question that probably follows him around for a good bit. But, after that, I thought that he did a really good job from there. I was really impressed with a throw that he had on a 3rd down while he was on the run. Hit Cam Sutton right on the sideline for a little toe drag swag. He threw a touchdown as well. It was a pretty quick speed out to the outside for, it was, I I don't even know exactly who the receiver was at the time, honestly. It was a pretty simplistic play, 3rd and goal, and he was able to put one in the end zone there, so that's definitely a positive. He ended up going 15 of 21, 125 yards, and a touchdown. So overall, I thought it was some pretty impressive debuts, showed a lot of arm talent across the board for these 5 guys that played over the course of the weekend, obviously excluding Drake May from that conversation. But I think that it's going to be a lot of fun to see how all of this plays out and what opportunities they're given, because obviously a lot of them in different situations. And that is something that I want to touch on as well in the next segment here, where Bo Nix he ended up coming off of the bench in this game. Jarrett Stidham getting the first couple series to himself before Bo Nix comes into the conversation. So I want to look at that situation in Denver as well as a couple other ones and talk about what we could have seen from preseason that could indicate when we could be getting a decision on who the starters are going to be and when they will be named. So we're going to be diving into all of that, but first a quick break. Stick with us and we will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. To access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to be looking at just some of the quarterback competitions that are taking place in training camp right now, a few weeks away from week 1 officially of the regular season. And I just want to look at some of the preseason performances from this past weekend and talk about what we saw there and how it could impact the ultimate decision here. So starting off with, as we just talked about on the prior to the break, with the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix, who the Broncos decided to draft with that 12th overall pick, meaning at that point too, with 5 quarterbacks already off of the board, Broncos were, you could say, a little bit desperate for a quarterback at that point. Now, Sean Payton has reportedly been very high on Bo Nix, which may also definitely be the case, but that's why I thought it was a little bit surprising when it was Jarrett Stidham that we saw on the field to begin the preseason game versus the Colts over the weekend. And Stidham, I thought that it was pretty clear that he just doesn't give you all that high of an upside. He was 4 of 7, 37 yards, and ended up throwing an interception going into double coverage there. Just a bad decision on his part. And I think that I like Stidham. I think that he's going a fine backup quarterback and that he can probably stick around in the league for a while. He's not a bad option to have. But if you're the Broncos at this point, especially with Sean Payton, clock feels like it's ticking a little bit on his time left in the league. That what are you really getting out of running Jarrett Stidham into week 1? Bo Nix was very impressive, I thought, relative to my expectations coming into this game. Obviously, it's preseason, it's against backups, so you can't take it all too seriously. But 15 of 21, 125 yards and a touchdown, and the offense was driving frequently with Bo Nix, that they were able to get some points out of it all. And again, I know that first throw that he had that we just referenced in the other segment, it was almost an interception. If the defender Cross was able to hold on to it, then would have been maybe a little bit of a different story here, looking at one interception for each of them. But I do think that Bo Nix is going to be, at this point, because Bo Nix is 24, 25 years old. I'm not sure what the point is. He's 24 years old. He's going to turn, 24 years old, turns 25 in February. So I just don't really understand what the point is of having him sit on the bench. It's not like I was extremely high on him coming out of school necessarily, but you look at what Stidham gives you on Sunday, and I just don't think that that's enough to justify, having him taking the reps over Bo Nix. So I would imagine that decision's going to be made somewhat shortly. We'll have to find out there, though. The other sort of hierarchy and order of events that I was surprised about was with the Las Vegas Raiders, where we saw Aiden O'Connell get the start over Gardner Minshew. O'Connell, to be fair, was in the Raiders, drafted by the Raiders last year, was in the building for the entire season. Gardner Minshew, the new face around campus, so Aiden O'Connell, almost from that perspective, I suppose, of seniority, ends up getting the nod there to start this game, and he was fine. I thought that they were both pretty comparable. Talents for how things ended up playing out in this game, and I feel like the Raiders probably have a similar chance of winning with either one of them, so almost to that point as well. It's like, I guess Aiden O'Connell has a little bit of a higher upside because he's younger, and the Raiders they liked him enough to draft him, and I think he was the 4th round in 2023, that maybe you're able to, get something out of it. I don't know if that's necessarily what I see the future being for O'Connell. Now, he ended up driving them right down to the red zone in this game, and I thought O'Connell on that first drive, and that's something that, I think that it's totally fair to give him credit for that. Just one drive is maybe a little bit of a representation that he has the inside positioning in terms of this race, but ultimately I kind of think that Gardner Minshew gives you the better chance to win at the end of the day. I know 6 of 12 isn't exactly great, but he also led a touchdown drive for himself. He actually led 2 touchdown drives in that first half. So I feel like Minshew kind of just puts you in better position to succeed, but I also understand it is a pretty close competition. I wouldn't say one of them is definitively past the other. As things currently stand, though, in that race, the Raiders are hoping, according to reports, that they are hoping to name a starter after the preseason game next week that they'll be playing against the Cowboys. So that, I suppose, is sort of the time that we're going to really get some answers there. Probably going to see O'Connell end up starting the game again and see if Gardner Minshew is able to make anything happen for himself. But the last race here that I want to talk about is between actually 2 players where only one of them saw the field this past weekend, and that is in Pittsburgh, trying to break down their current situation. We did see the Justin Fields debut in Pittsburgh on Friday night. Russell Wilson still dealing with the leg injury, so ultimately he doesn't end up playing this game. Justin Fields ends up getting 2 drives. He was 5 of 6 with 67 yards. Now, that does not include 2 fumbled snaps between him and center Nate Herbig, so a little bit messy there. It seemed fine once Zach Frazier came in, and Zach Frazier, by the way, I know we're talking quarterbacks here. Nobody really cares about offensive linemen like that, but I thought Zach Frazier, I loved the pick when they made it out of West Virginia, the center. I thought he looked great in this game as well. I definitely have some thoughts on the Pittsburgh offensive line that I won't necessarily bore you with all that much right now, but the race is between Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, and I don't think that there is necessarily anything that Fields can do to steal the job from Wilson in terms of throughout the preseason. Now, I'm not saying it's totally off the table. I do feel like the way that the Steelers' dynamic sort of played out, bringing in Russell Wilson first to give him his redemption shot at this super cheap contract that Russell Wilson was on board for that and then the Justin Fields trade just sort of fell into their lap, that I do think that it's going to be Russell Wilson's job to lose. Justin Fields, the biggest thing is just sort of to put some film out there for everybody else in the media, in Steelers fandom, and at least, have people be aware of his presence on the roster. Wilson's probably going to be the starter in week 1, but, I think that a lot of pretty beatable competition in these first few weeks. If the offense doesn't look great, Justin Fields, especially if he's able to go and put out some good performances moving forward here. I wouldn't say he was bad versus Houston, but I also don't think that it was overly positive either. So it kind of makes the decision almost easier for the Steelers. Go out there and make sure they can't forget about you is sort of the territory that Justin Fields is currently in right now. And Tomlin hasn't definitively, at one point he did sort of make it sound like there is no quarterback battle. I think that he's walked back a little bit since then, but I do think that this isn't all too much of a competition for week 1, but is a conversation that is going to last into the regular season, especially if Justin Fields is able to perform. One other, since we have a couple minutes here, the last sort of quarterback competition I would throw in there is the Vikings, where I don't think that there's really going to be all that much of a decision to make. I think that it sounds like it is going to be Sam Darnold ending up starting for the season, but I think that J.J. McCarthy is probably going to be shortly following afterwards, and it is, I think it's at least a conversation, I suppose, sort of what I said to the point of the Broncos earlier with the Bo Nix conversation is, you're not really all that competitive of a team anyways. You may as well just let your guy go get some run. Now, JJ probably a little less refined and experienced than Bo Nix, but at the same time, I think he's going to be able to play. I think he's going to play this year eventually, mostly so because I don't believe that Sam Darnold is the answer for Minnesota, but I am curious to follow along with the reporting from that perspective and see if anything does end up moving along those lines. But let me know what your thoughts were on some of these quarterback battles and whether or not there is a current starter that you think is in danger of losing their job shortly. But we are going to be wrapping up the show now with a preview of the upcoming season for the Chicago Bears. So we will be diving into that next. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to be headed into our final segment as we preview the upcoming season for the Chicago Bears. And obviously, with the Bears right now, the number one storyline is, what does Caleb Williams look like? Because they take him with the first overall pick, and not just that, but obviously a lot of sort of noise surrounding the selection. Last year had the first overall pick, decided that they were going to stick with Justin Fields, end up trading what turns into the pick for them to be able to draft Caleb. And after last year, they decided that they didn't see the ceiling with Justin Fields, that they wanted to reset that quarterback contract. So they end up moving off of Fields for practically nothing. And it was a conditional 6th round pick that could turn into a 4th round pick based off of draft compensation. So basically traded him for nothing, but I do think it was the right decision from their perspective to not have a bit of a quarterback controversy between Caleb and Justin Fields. I understand quarterback competition in general is a good thing from the perspective of you don't want to necessarily give any free handouts in terms of job security, but Caleb Williams, they're bringing him in because they think that he is the answer, and it just would not be necessary for them to have him and Justin Fields splitting reps throughout training camp and having that always being a conversation with the media. So they sort of wash their hands of Justin Fields and bring in Caleb, which I think was the right decision. And the thing is that now that decision's been made and they have decided to press the reset button on the quarterback position, that means that in the front office, now they're sort of on the clock here in terms of pressure. And I think that that's the case for both head coach Matt Eberflus and general manager Ryan Poles. And both of them are going to be facing an immense amount of pressure to specifically make this work with Caleb Williams, because typically you don't get more than 2 chances at a quarterback before you are failing at your job, or at least that's the perception. So both of their reputations are now going to be tied into Caleb Williams at this point. They're going to have to do everything they can to help him succeed. And during the offseason, they definitely made moves to try and do so, bringing in some veterans such as Keenan Allen and DeAndre Swift to try and improve their offense. And for whatever it's worth as well, they already have Cole Kmet, but they bring in Gerald Everett additionally as a sort of depth tight end as well. They, have been drafting offensive linemen the past couple years to try and set that up in the best way possible. So the Bears additionally could have included him in this graphic. They draft Rome Odunze with the 9th overall pick, another wide receiver. So they have done, in my opinion, a very good job of surrounding Caleb Williams with a ton of options for talent at other skill positions. And you look at the offensive numbers from the Bears last season, and there's a reason they decided to make some changes, and that they are going to need to be better. 20th in total offense, 18th in scoring offense. Now, they're going to definitely hope that number goes up. Probably not going to get the same level of run production from the Bears, where last year they were very adamant about using Justin Fields' legs, sort of leaned away from it in the beginning of the year, eventually came back around on it. And for whatever it's worth as well, the Bears have a very talented running back room in terms of, they bring in DeAndre Swift, but I think that Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson are also really good options for them, that I don't know if there is a deeper running back room, at least 3 deep. There's some nice 2-headed duos out there, one even within the same division with the Lions, but that'll be a conversation for later this week. But I think that they're really hoping that they can continue to have a productive run game and get better with passing itself. 27th in passing offense last year. That's where Justin Fields sort of lost his job, and yes, he was dealing with injuries, so it's not like he played in all 17 games. Tyson Bagent taking a number of those, but they have all of the they have receivers, they have tight ends, they have options out of the backfield. And I don't think that their offensive line, it's definitely not an elite offensive line by any means, but I think that people are very down on it, and they've done a lot of things, in my opinion, to improve it over the course of the past couple of years, where I kind of feel like they can be league average, that they are, a pretty middle of the pack group. You draft Darnell Wright in last year in the first round, and he had a pretty fine showing for himself during his rookie campaign. They go out and they sign Coleman Shelton in free agency, who was a pretty good pass blocking offensive lineman as well. And I think that they are going to be able to at least hold up enough for Caleb Williams to the point where he's not just running for his life the entire time. Defensively, a year ago, I would have told you that they don't have any, real solidified star players on that group, but they make the trade at the deadline to bring in Montez Sweat, who was incredible down the stretch of the season with the Bears, and they reward him with a big-time contract. And I thought that was a very nice move from Ryan Poles and the front office group. Their linebacking core is fine. TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, both solid players. But when I look at the secondary, that I see a lot of young talent that I can buy into. They spend the offseason bringing back Jalen Johnson on a new deal that he's a very good cornerback for them. Then some of the names here, Jaquan Brisker, I've loved him since his rookie year in 2022. Kyler Gordon as well. I think that both of them have some pretty nice hit power along with being able to play in coverage. Tyreek Stevenson was a nice draft pickup from last year as well. On top of that, they make a couple additional moves, bringing in some veteran talent with Kevin Byard and Jonathan Owens. This is not a bad secondary, and while I think that they definitely have room to grow, Matt Eberflus had them playing legitimately, and that is his background is defense. They were legitimately a top half of the league defense down the final stretch of the year, averaged, held opponents to under 20 points per game, I believe it was, during the final stretch of last year, the last 6 games or so. And I think that there's a lot to be encouraged about the way that the Bears were playing defense and just playing in general down the stretch of last year. Looking at their schedule, Sharp Football Analysis actually has them with the 3rd easiest schedule. I don't know if I totally see it that way. I think that early on here, couple games on the road with some sort of tough AFC South opponents at Houston and at Indy, weeks 2 or 3. Some physical defenses. We could see maybe some growing pains from Caleb Williams there. I don't think that the Rams or the Jaguars at home in weeks 4 and 6 are necessarily pushovers either. Now, and I think that the NFC North is a very good division that I have a hard time imagining really that they can definitely, I would say, sweep the Vikings in this upcoming season. Do have a little bit of a mistake here on the graphics wise in terms of their schedule, that I believe their game at Minnesota is week 15 as opposed to in Chicago, which we have on the schedule. So audio listeners, don't even worry about that. But I do think that, there's some tough games on the road for Chicago, so I probably wouldn't have them as the 3rd easiest schedule. But that being said, I still think that they can accomplish a lot of positives this season. You look at where they were at last year and having some questions at quarterback, and for a lot of the year having questions on defense. They ended up winning 7 games and were able to get the 1st overall pick, draft an extremely highly touted quarterback in Caleb Williams that I think has a ton of promise for his rookie season. So I think they end up winning 9 games this year. I think they're going to be in that wild card playoff hunt for pretty much the entire year. I think it's going to come down to those last couple weeks for them, and just looking back at the schedule one last time. Some divisional games, again, in Minnesota week 15, at home against Detroit week 16. Seahawks are never a pushover necessarily, and then in Lambeau for week 18. Throw in there as well at Detroit week 13, at San Francisco week 14. That's a tough way to close the year in my opinion, but like I said, I do think that they're going to be in it for the majority of the year, and I think that they can finish this season with a winning record. I do have faith in the infrastructure of what they have. So we're going to be continuing on with the NFC North as the week goes on here and talk about what is a very strong division, in my opinion, between the Bears and, sorry Vikings fans, I'm specifically looking at the Lions and Packers in terms of teams that are going to be more playoff competitive now, but it's not like the Vikings are a bottom of the barrel team either. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section, what you agree, what you disagree with. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back tomorrow afternoon, same time as always at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. I'm your host, TJ Mabardi, and we will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.